Hey everybody, digital learning days, week 4, day 2. Number 1 says, does this equation have one solution, no solution, or infinite many solutions? I have to solve for x in order to determine this. So the first thing I want to do is get x on one side by itself. So I'm going to create a zero pair here. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So this creates a zero pair. Well, this also happens to create a zero pair. Negative 15x plus 15x is 0. There is no x left with it. The x is completely wiped out. And that equals negative 35. Well, I know that 0 does not equal negative 35. So this would be no solution. Number 2 says, what is the cube root of 512? Whenever we have a 3 here, that means the cube root. So this is asking the same thing as x cubed equals 512. So what number can we multiply by itself 3 times to give us 512? On the 8th grade milestones, this would have been a no calculator question. So the way I would go about doing this if I didn't have a calculator is I would start with 5. And I know, and these are the ones that you guys were supposed to memorize, but I don't expect anybody to actually remember it now. But you can come over here and work it on your paper. So 5 times 5 times 5 would be 25 times 5, which is 125. Well, I know 125 is way less than 512. So let's go up to 10. 10 times 10 times 10 would be 100 times 10, which is 1,000. Well, 512 is less than 1,000. So let's go in the middle here of 5 and 10. And I'm going to pick 8 times 8 times 8 because I know that that's right. That's going to be 64 times 8. Which equals 512. So the cube root of 512 is going to be 8. Number 3 says a television screen has a 15-inch diagonal and a 12-inch height. What is the width of the screen? Well, of course, I always like to draw a picture. So this is my television screen. We know that they're typically rectangular. The diagonal goes from one corner to the opposite corner is 15 inches. The height is 12 inches, and we need to know the width. So the thing that needs to pop into my head here is, hey, I can use Pythagorean theorem in order to solve this. So I'm going to take my Pythagorean theorem and I'm going to plug in what I know to solve for what I don't know. Now, it's important to remember here that A and B are your leg lengths and C is your hypotenuse. So I'm going to put 12 squared plus B squared. I'm solving for my unknown leg length equals 15 squared. 12 squared is 144 plus B squared equals 15 squared, which is 225. Then I need to subtract 144 from both sides to get B on a side by itself. And that's 225 minus 144 equals 81. So B squared equals 81. I need to take the square root of both sides. And I know that the square root of 81 is 9 because 9 times 9 is 81. So B or X equals 9. The width of that TV screen is 9 inches. Number 4 says, do the following relations represent a function? Yes or no, why or why not? And the definition of a function is every input has only one output. We know our X's are our inputs and our Y's are our outputs. So here we have an input of 7 with an output of 7, an input of 8 with an output of 14, an input of 8 with an output of 21. And I see here that I have one input with two different outputs. So that would make this not a function because the input of 8 has two different outputs. So this is no, because the input 8 has two different outputs. And then number 5 says, which point best represents the square root of 12 on the number line? And we're given a couple different options, which is a decimal in between 3.2 and 3.3, a decimal in between 3.4 and 3.5, a decimal of 3.6, and a decimal in between 3.8 and 3.9. So we can't just say that the square root of 12 is in between the square root of 9 and the square root of 16, which means it would be in between 3 and 4, because all of our answer choices are in between 3 and 4. We have to narrow it down to a more specific number. And the way we know that if this is in between 3 and 4, then it's going to be 3 point something. And the way we get that decimal is we count the difference between our first two numbers, which would be 12 minus 9 is 3, and that's going to be your numerator. And the difference between our first number and our last number, 16 minus 9 is going to be 7. So it would be 3 3/7. And then if this was a no calculator question, we would use long division to do 3 divided by 7 to come up with our decimal. But since we're at home and we all have our calculators, I'm just going to do it here. 3 divided by 7 is going to be approximately 3.43. So now I'm going to go back to my answer choices, and the one that is between 3.4 and 3.5 is answer choice B. So the answer to number 5 is B. You guys have a great day.